And now we are joined on the line by former Concourt Justice Albie Sachs to help us reflect on the passing of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. Justice, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. Obviously, the country, the world, really in shock, completely devastated by this profound loss. How do we make sense of this moment in our history?
You know, I feel the shock. I only heard 5 minutes ago, but I'm smiling. And I think that was what was so special about the Arch, Desmond Tutu. That feeling of humor, humanity. And I just remember so vividly, I think it was April the 10th, 1993, a terrible day. Chris Hani had been assassinated the day before. And where could we go? And we went to St. George's Cathedral. We were secular, we were believers, we were Muslims, Jews, atheists. We all went to St. George's Cathedral. And I remember Desmond Tutu, normally full of smiles, full of good humor, this time looking very, very stern. And as we got there, somebody had set a car alight on the Grand Parade. Smoke was spiraling up into the sky. There was a sense of gloom and doom and horror. And Desmond Tutu came forward, beautifully robed, and he put out his arms and he said, "We are the rainbow people of God." And he said it in a way that brought joy and comfort and energy and support and togetherness amongst all of us. I'm very, very secular. You couldn't be more holy and religious than Desmond Tutu. And maybe he saw godliness in my secular self, and I saw huge humanity in his very religious self. But that was somehow that special quality that he had to reach out to everybody, to make everybody feel welcome in his embrace, in his vision, his understanding of God, God as a God of love. And I think it's that spirit that endures well beyond the passing of his body. I imagine him with his twinkle in his eye. I've never actually seen a twinkle in anybody's eye, but you know what I mean. Going up to heaven and laughing all his way up, and being embraced by his God, and his God embracing him, while I, in my secular self, say, well, maybe you're right. Who knows what's right? Who knows about these things of eternity? What we do know is Desmond Tutu was an astonishing, wonderful, superb human being who reached out to everybody, who was loved by everybody. And we mourn his passing, and yet I smile a little bit. I smile a little bit because that twinkle never left his eye.
Thank you. Thank you, Justice, for sharing that joyous memory of the Archbishop. I think that certainly will be stamped in all our memories. And just talking about the quality, the type of man that he was, what you just described to us, he seemed to be a beacon of light of sorts, an individual who was consumed with the task of bringing people together. I mean, earlier I was talking about how he was this country's moral compass and the voice of reason, encouraging us to walk down the path of reconciliation, encouraging us to take on dialogue as opposed to taking on arms. And I wonder, Justice, if you would indulge me on this particular subject matter. You know, he was, of course, the father of the TRC. It is a legacy that will always live alongside him. And yet we as a country have very mixed feelings about the work of the TRC. What is your consideration on this issue?
You know, I think of him as a moral compass, yes, and yet it wasn't a morality with a whip. It was a morality of love, of hope, of optimism, of enabling the best to be discovered even in the worst, and being very skeptical about the worst in the best, because there was no kind of glory. There was no person who could say, I'm completely, in his language, completely without sin, without fault. So it was that solidity, that conviction, that strength that came from his belief, but more than just his beliefs, more than just the words, more than just the catechism. It was his existence, the way he connected with people, the way he had courage to face up to the violence in our society, not to run away from it, not to simply wish it away, but to face up without becoming a violent person himself. And I think it's these qualities really transcend the particular human being, because you say you call him the father of the Truth Commission. Yes and no. The Truth Commission came from the wish of millions of people to deal with the past and finding the person who would best articulate it in the most humane way, who could reach out to everybody. And I think it's those qualities that do continue. And there are, if you like, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of little Desmond Tutus and Leah Tutus all over the world, in our country and elsewhere. I don't think he would assume to himself any exceptional virtue other than the ability to reach out to everybody and anybody.
Yeah. You know, Justice, lastly, not so long ago, you and I were in conversation, in fact, celebrating the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution into law. It seems as this country we're often faced with, you know, moments of celebrations like the one I just mentioned and moments of profound loss such as this. Moving forward as a country, how do we honor the legacy of Desmond Tutu?
Well, the Constitution is our compass, and he was wholeheartedly behind the Constitution, and I think he loved the idea that the words Nkosi were part of the Constitution, but not a dominant, brooding, looking down, saying, we know what you're doing, kind of a thing, watching people, but something that would uplift the spirit. And the Constitution, we happen to have a copy of the preamble as the backcloth to my presentation now, was the product of millions of people expressing and believing in the hope that he believed in, believing in our fallibility as well, taking steps to avoid the fallibility, leading us into more than temptation and destruction, providing institutions, providing freedom of speech, providing alternative positions to be in contestation with each other. I think these are the things that give us strength in South Africa, our ability to argue, to debate, to listen, and to follow certain fundamental norms that we've agreed upon. Some people would see these norms ultimately as being derived from God Almighty. Others would see them deriving from the history of human beings, our own intelligence. Others might see them as combinations of all of that. But it's the Constitution, I think, that provides us with the guide that embodies the things that he stood for, that he fought for, that was all-embracing and wide enough to include everybody.
Right. Justice, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your memory of the Archbishop and helping us to really, as a country, mourn and grieve this loss.